Introducing Zach Davis and Josh Anderson with the SoundMoney Podcast.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the SoundMoney Sound Principles Podcast. Josh Anderson here with Zach Davis. How are you, Zach?
I'm good. Hey, everybody. It's good to be back.
Man, we are excited today. You know, we're coming into Powell. Powell delivered his final hawkish hold with no signal for rate cuts. Gold dipped to an intraday, but low, but it found its floor again at like 46.15, which is now we'll talk about today, which is coming out to be the absolute floor. We've now seen this 7 times in the last month and a half. And we now are going to lay out the timeline. Right now, it's going to start the new era at the Fed with Kevin Warsh. We're going to see what happens there as he steps into the chair. We're going to look at what that looks like for silver and what that looks like for gold. Pretty exciting times as we jump into that. And then on the back half today, Zach, when we talk about our sound money principles, we're going to talk and share today with creating an unstoppable culture, right? Talk about team culture inside of your business or inside of your teams, or if you have a job and the people you work with, how you can actually cultivate a team environment. For you and I, that's been paramount in everything that we've accomplished has been a team culture. So I want to jump right in today, Zach. We're going to talk about this week's Sound Money Report. If you're not aware, you can go find this at sound.money under the news section. We put this out every week. This week's infograph shares some awesome information about Powell's final hawkish hold and kind of a look back on what Secretary Powell has done for gold for the last, I guess, has he been in 7 years? I'm trying to remember. Maybe 8 years. And so, Zach, what are some of your takes this week on Secretary Powell's hawkish hold? Right, his press conference was a dead one. So take it away for a sec, Zach.
Yeah, not much. There was nothing in the press conference. I mean, it was pretty much just I'm out, and there is not going to be any rate decreases for the year. So it definitely showed. It definitely showed where the mindset of the Federal Reserve is. I think it definitely is going to give investors. It's definitely going to give them some pause to go, okay, what's this new guy going to do, right? But it already priced it in. And by the way, on his way out, thank you, Fed Powell, because you crushed it for us in the gold and silver world. Like, you absolutely crushed it for us. So, I mean, you couldn't have done a worse job of being the Fed to do a better job of making gold and silver go up. But in all fairness, coming into it, he was in an impossible position, and this next go around, it's an impossible position. It's like rocking a hard place. Where to even go?
Yeah, exactly. I whether you like him or hate him, it doesn't matter. If you're a gold bug, or if you're somebody who decides to not hold their money in fiat currency but hold it in gold and silver, you should love the Powell era, right? Your gold went up by 346%. That's 3x during his tenure. Boy, that for me and for you, that was an awesome run. 1260 when he took office, when he took the position, left at an all-time high of 5608. We've dipped, down to 4800. But my goodness, this is crazy, right? So hey, love him or hate him, his era is over. He's walking out the door. I did think it was interesting that he did not allude to any for the future on his way out.
Nothing.
Good deal for some,
Yeah.
But
and which, and by the way, with his run, that is why I don't sell any gold or silver unless I absolutely have to. Like, yeah. I don't sell it. I just keep it. Like, my strategy is contrarian. I just buy it a little bit at a time and I keep it, because over the long term, you win. Trying to time the market, you're going to lose.
It's the buying power. It's retirement. It's the future. It's security. Zach, some of our listeners care about these things. Some don't, right? But now there's some hurdles, right? Kevin Warsh he cleared committee last week on the 29th, which was a big deal. And we had some craziness, some fireworks by some of the Democrats, kind of funny, but comical. I'm a history and a political buff, so I think it's fun to listen to these people make fools of themselves. But big next day, May 11th, it will be the full Senate vote it's expected that he's going to pass all that, and he'll become the new Fed chair. And so
it was pretty clear party line at the Fed, right?
Yeah.
So it's going to be pretty clear party line at the Senate.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, they'll get it done. The real takeaway is what you just mentioned, right? He's coming into a $39 trillion national debt, which will drive inflation, which we talked about last week. The interest payments alone now are bigger than the actual budget for the Defense Department. And so these are real challenges, which means the persistent silver supply deficit is just going to become the next topic of conversation. And I don't care who you are or what you're doing, big opportunities within the silver market. I actually saw something this week, Zach, that was really remarkable, and maybe get your take on it. Bank of America actually changed their silver prediction for the year. And I know this is going to sound kind of wild and crazy, but they did it this giant range. They said it could be as low as $160 an ounce. It could be as high as $309 an ounce. They revised their silver outlook for the remainder of 26 to their shareholders of Bank of America, and that was the range. I think that's the craziest range I've ever seen, from 160 an ounce to 309 an ounce. That's their forecast. And why they get to 309, who knows? Like, it's like an odd number. But I think, wow, if they're at all right, let's say they suck and it only does what they said is their low range of 160. Watch out, world, like those who hold silver. Any thoughts on that new prediction and the silver supply shortage we've talked about before?
Yeah, I don't think it's surprising. I really don't think it's surprising at all, because none of the banks deleveraged, right? They all have kept their bullish positions on where they think silver and gold is going to go. And with all this war stuff going on, the interest rate staying the same, wars coming in, none of them came back and said, okay, we think gold prices and silver prices are going to go down, which tells you something. They don't have confidence in the economy. They know that there's this big squeeze with the debt. You got over $1 trillion in interest payments. Nobody's going to show up to buy that debt because you're not making money off of the interest. So now it's the buyer of last resort, which is the Fed, has to buy it back, right? I mean, it's this big circular movement of money that doesn't even make any sense. And the bottom line is silver is stuck like a ping pong ball, just bouncing between all of this news, because it is so heavily used in utility, but yet there are some people who speculate it. There are so many people now that hold it physically that they can't just manipulate it on paper. So you're going to see these really crazy swings in gold and silver. And I think that's why they came out and said, we think maybe 160, we think maybe 309, because they have no idea where this ping pong is going to go. But I think it's interesting. The one thing they did say is they think it is definitely going to go up. And it's because they know the future of AI. They know the future of the car market. They know the future of data centers, and they know the future of physical holders. Like, there's just not enough of it to meet the demand in silver supply.
I'll share this part of this week's infographic for the listeners. If you're watching this on YouTube, for a 6th consecutive silver deficits coming this year. But I saw some really interesting things. You and I both, we like to follow quite a few really big tech giants when it comes to, the podcast world and listening. And what was interesting this week, Zach, is the AI grid expansion. They actually came out and said this past week, that half of all projects that were planned for 26 and 27 are currently on hold, not because we don't need them, not because we have to have them, but because of the shortage of silver. Where this was interesting, right? When prices hit an all-time high back in February, a bunch of these semiconductor companies and a bunch of these people making these new infrastructure plans, solar grids, and namely the solar industry, they came out and they tried to replace the silver paste they use for solar panels. And they tried to replace it with a copper variant, right? Because it's so much cheaper at these new prices. And already we're only in the 3rd month, and they found corrosion on those that were deployed. Well, of course, copper corrodes. We've known this since going back 5,000 years. We know that copper corrodes, but silver doesn't corrode, right? And tarnish. So all of a sudden, what they thought was going to be a savior in changing this paste to copper base it's coming to fruition after 90 days, that it's not a solution. And so my takeaway is, right, we got a massive AI grid and expansion. We got a shortage in silver. We're in for, that's why your point about the ping pong ball and the silver, like they don't know. Is it going to be 160? Is it going to be 309? They don't know. It's this giant area. All I know is silver's trading today at $72. And if you're wise enough to go get some today at a dollar cost averaging game, guess what? Doesn't matter if it's 160 or 309. And it doesn't matter if it bounces around in those numbers. You have absolutely won if that's the case. So good.
Yeah, 100%.
Good information there. Zach, this is interesting. Maybe just a minute or two here. Hit the all-time high of 56.08 with gold a few months ago. Since then, we've bounced around, but now for a multiple times, we have bounced off of this 43.61 major support for the gold market. For those of our listeners who are not, that don't understand technicals, or they don't understand that a price will come down and hit and test a resistance level multiple times, and if it continues to bounce off it, it becomes a new floor for whether it's a stock or whether it's a currency or whether in this case it's gold. What does it actually mean when gold continually finds a hard resistance floor of 46.15? What does that mean in layman terms?
Yeah, it means it's looking for the real value that it has in the marketplace based on the economy, right? Because you got to remember, silver trades because of its dual identity, because we use so much of it, the utility value of it, and some of the speculation value of it. Gold really isn't about the utility. Now, there is some utility value to gold, right? We do use some gold in like cell phones and those kind of things, but not near to the level that we do silver. So silver really is traded on its monetary value, or is traded as a store of value. So really what it said when it came down to hit, and by the way, when it's bounced off this floor a few times, like you said, Josh, and the last time, it like really rejected it. It hit it and then sprang off of it, which always gives me a lot of confidence whenever I'm looking at it going, okay, that is a really solid floor. It does not want to go below this support line. And the reason why is because everything else, like we've said the last couple of podcasts, everything else going on in the economy, like take all the noise out, all the news cycles, everything, just the underlying health of the economy says to gold, we're in trouble. So this is where gold needs to be. So if you were going to turn all the debt over, if you were going to fix all this kind of stuff, gold would have to be this price to make things work. Like that's just the way the economy is right now, which should make people a little bit nervous.
Yeah, and so those are things, right, that are pretty awesome. We've shared with this a little bit with the listeners, and for those that have paid attention, it's been a big win for you. But all time, right? Come off the all-time high in January. At that time, around that $5,600 mark, the end of January, you could have saved and got a real value at $102, $190 value. Currently, same thing. You're buying gold today at a $234 an ounce discount, which there's just been a few times in history that you get the opportunity to do that. And thank goodness for fractional buying at SoundMoney, right? That you get that opportunity. And so we're super excited about the future of gold and silver. Like there's unbelievable opportunities there. And we would just, I'd counsel any listeners, hey, now's the time, right? There's an opportunity here. We keep saying this. There's an opportunity that just hasn't existed for the average common man or woman that is on the table today. And so we're super bullish on it. We think it's we think there's opportunities there that are tremendous. So we're going to shift gears now for a minute, Zach. We're going to jump into the sound principles part of the show today. This week, we often get asked this question. I think it's a good time where we're just talking about the Fed chair changing. We're talking about new management inside that organization, and there will be a lot of differences. For example, one of the things that Kevin Horsch wants to do is he doesn't want to hold as many press conferences. He doesn't want to have the Fed wagging the tail of the entire economy by his announcements, and so that's a new culture, right? That's a cultural change and a cultural shift that's going to happen. That will be felt around the world, right? We've had a Fed chair that loved to stand in front of the cameras and talk, and markets reacted up, down, up, down, up, down. And the new one says that's not his MO. But that's a cultural change.
The market should just do what the market does, is what his philosophy is.
Yeah. And we agree with that wholeheartedly. Whenever there's interference, it's usually not for the best. But that's a cultural change, right? And that's a leadership change. And so we want to take a few minutes today and we want to dive into this principle that you and I think is vital inside of business. Whether you're a manager as an employee and you're managing people or operations, or whether you're a small business owner and you're managing a team, or whether you're a small business owner, you're trying to grow a team, the upcoming discussion is for you, right? So for us, it really is, you've got to create an unstoppable team culture where people thrive and soar together, right? And so we want to jump in today, Zach, around this topic of what does it look like and how do you create a team culture within your business? Because you and I both, we've been blessed enough to have lots of tremendous businesses, ones that have done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars a year in sales. We've had some that we are passionate about that we think we're going to be the greatest things in the world that couldn't get $5 in sales a year, and oftentimes I've come to the realization that oftentimes it isn't even the product that's as important as the team, the culture. I'm going to start this segment by just saying this, right? Without naming names or companies. I don't want anybody to be offended that has worked these. We had the opportunity to view a company from a distance. We didn't have any ownership in it. We didn't have any, but we saw it for a lot of years, and we had the opportunity to oftentimes give counsel and ideas about this business. But that business, for one reason or another, about halfway through its evolution, its culture changed. Its culture changed to a culture of what I would consider to be negativity, a little bit of a backbiting culture where people would gather around a water cooler and talk ill of their bosses or their coworkers. They would take opportunities to find fault with one another. And that culture became like a cancer. And pretty soon it bled over to the way they interacted with not just each other at the water cooler, but it really took a steep decline when they began to do it with customers, right? When that culture became persistent and they became short and negative and rude to the customers, right? The people that they serviced every day. And by the time the management was able to understand it, it was almost too late. The damage had been done. They had lost the customers and they had lost the sales, and they weren't repairable. And I look back on that often, and I think it started with allowing a little bit of cancer into the team culture. So Zach, why don't we jump in today and what makes a good team culture? What are the things that you have, the core areas that you got to have to grow a good team culture within your organization, team, or business?
Well, I think one of the biggest things that you have to have is you have to have people who, number one, they're not afraid to make mistakes. They can own up to it. Like they know their job, what their job is. They have a clear understanding of what they're supposed to be doing, and the people around them trust them to do the job. And that if they make some sort of mistake or whatever, they're not going to get their head cut off, right? I mean, there definitely has to be some correction and all that kind of stuff. But people want to work in an environment where they get to use their skill set and they get to use their creativity, and they're not micromanaged. So there has to be a high level of trust in the team, right? That the other team members trust them to do their job, and that they trust the other team members to do their job. Same thing with management. You see way too many times where you've got one manager who has got his thumb on multiple employees, right? And nobody gets to move, nobody gets to do anything unless the manager says to do it. Well, that's not a great team environment, because now there's no autonomy. People just don't go get things done. They're always waiting, and they're scared that they're going to get their hands slapped because they did something wrong. And that is not a good way to have people excited to come to work and want to perform their best. They literally are just showing up, trying not to get yelled at, clocking out, and then trying to get their paycheck. So I think one of the big things that there has to be a high level of trust in the team, right? The people are going to perform and they're going to do it. There's a lot of times you see even in great companies, but a lot of times in mediocre companies, you see this mentality where this is my lane and I'm going to stay in it and I'm going to do my job and everybody else just leave me alone and I'm not going to help with anybody else. It's not my job. I think a really good team has the ability to not only get your job done, but also be watching for others and seeing where there is help needed. And if you have an opportunity to jump in and help other people and collaborate and spread ideas, well, that creates an environment where everybody else is looking at everybody else is winning, right? So I always say there's two ways to have the biggest building in town. And oftentimes what you get in companies and corporate environments, especially, is you get this ladder climbing where everybody's trying to get to the next promotion. And so what happens is with having the biggest building in town, either you can just focus on building your building and make it as big as you can, or you can run around and just knock everybody else's buildings down, right? And really bad environments and companies, that's what you see is you constantly see one employee throwing another employee under the bus, or the water cooler effect that you mentioned, right? You get 3 or 4 employees that get around and they talk really bad about this one key employee who's kicking butt, and they try to figure out ways that they can make them look bad. So you have to have a collaborative team where people are wanting other people to win, right? Everybody's looking, going, hey, your building's getting really big and awesome. I'm going to keep growing my building, but how can I help you grow your building? Because a rising tide raises all boats. What most people understand is if you try to get somebody else fired at the company, you're probably the one going to get fired, because all of a sudden you become the cancer, right? So those are 2 things I would say are top of the list that you really got to have in order to create an effective team and a culture where people can really win.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, right? Trust your teammates. You and I have a philosophy we live by, right? If we're going to hire someone to do a task, we trust them to do it. We even give them lots and lots of rope to try and correct it if it's wrong. But you got to trust them. You got to trust them to do it, and you got to realize that sometimes you might fail at it. They'll fail, you'll fail in conjunction. It's okay, no big deal. Learn from it, do it. But trust definitely builds culture. And you're right. Your thoughts around collaboration drive success is paramount, right? Like that's what makes it work. I think the next key ingredient to a team, though, is accountability, right? Accountability fuels growth. Gosh dang, you and I won't use this business either, but man, we got a business that it's had a lack of accountability from the general manager down to the assistant managers to the staff. And we've had an accountability issue, right, for a little while. And we've been in a spot because of some external circumstances where we weren't allowed to fix it. And man, the lack of accountability when the leader, the top of the food chain in any organization, isn't accountable to their peers, to those that they are over, or when those that need to report to someone above them aren't accountable. Nothing ever, growth stagnates, nothing happens. But when there's real accountability, metrics, measurables, realistic goals, and then accountability behind them, my goodness, businesses can thrive. And so it's one of the key culture things, right? Finding a balance between how to help people be accountable and holding them accountable so that you can have a healthy culture. Zach, any thoughts on that real quick before we move on to the last subject there? What is it about accountability that makes that changes or improves the culture? Because a lot of people will be listening and going, no, it's my accountability that's ruining the culture in my business. It's me being accountable to the boss or the boss to me that's driving this wedge in the company. But what's your takeaway of that accountability actually creates a team culture and fuels growth?
Yeah, I think accountability is huge. I think there's 2 ways to look at accountability as well. When you have accountability and people know exactly what their job is and they have key metrics like you mentioned that they're fighting for, somebody has to hold them accountable, or you have to have a highly self-motivated team that can hold themselves accountable. And I've not met very many people that can do that. Most people are like, I kind of didn't hit it. That's okay. We'll just try again next time. Right. There's not that drive of like, hey, let's make it. So with the accountability of the key metrics, it's critical, because if everybody else is like, oh, it doesn't matter if we hit the goals, then no problem, right? And if nobody's checking on it, okay, did we hit the goals? What are our metrics? Are we close? Where did we fall short? How do we fix it? Then the whole organization falls apart, because when you set a goal as a company and this is where you're wanting to go, but there's never any follow-up and there's never any accountability, then pretty quick what the team does next time you come around and go, hey, let's set this goal, the team goes, yeah, whatever. We're going to set this goal and nobody's actually going to work on it. Nobody's going to care. Nobody's going to follow up with me. All right. And then I think the other piece of accountability is the honesty piece, right? Are your people accountable for their actions, or is it always somebody else's fault? Or is there always this blame game going on, which, the company that you were just describing, typically what happens is, hey, why didn't this get done well? And there's all these excuses. Well, if the manager is not accountable, it doesn't have accountability and some integrity, then guess what? That bleeds down into the rest of the organization. And they all go, well, if the manager doesn't have to own up for their crap, then I definitely don't have to own up for my crap. And then what you get is you start getting everybody else pointing fingers going, well, Johnny was late 3 times this week and I'm always on time. But you know what? Johnny never gets in trouble. There's no accountability. So I'm going to be late. And then pretty quick it becomes a habit and you're late all the time. And so without any accountability and all these metrics and having an accountable team, that's what starts to happen. Is there was an old program, I don't know if you remember this, Josh. This is a long time ago. Some of our listeners remember this. You'd go to the grocery store and they had these stamps that you could collect in like this little green book. And every time you bought groceries, you put a stamp in there. And once the stamp book was full, you got a discount on groceries, right? So this theory, this idea of accountability, one of my mentors one time taught me that this is what happens in an organization when you don't have accountability. Everybody starts stamp collecting. So like in the example, somebody comes late, right? And there's supposed to be consequences when you come late, but then you're in the board meeting and somebody comes in the board meeting late and the manager doesn't say anything and there's no consequences, there's no accountability. Everybody else in the room just went, oh, I'm going to put a stamp in my book, right? Johnny was late. There's one stamp. Or somebody didn't get their project done on time. And now it holds the whole team up. And there's no accountability, right? There's no reprimand. There's no nothing happen. The whole team that's involved in that project goes, there's another stamp in my book. And once that book's full, all of a sudden they start going, well, I'm cashing in. I'm not getting my projects in on time because nobody cares. I'm going to show up late. I'm going to leave early because nobody cares. And then your organization just falls apart. It's over.
Yeah, and you and I both realize this, right? When you have an organization that starts to do that, if you come in and you set realistic expectations, you lay out the vision, right? Everyone has a shared vision. If all of a sudden you have what we call radical transparency, right? Like everything becomes transparent for each other. We call out, we make the metrics, we make the goals, we make the metrics, we call out in front of one another whether those are working or not. If you have radical transparency there, nobody's collecting stamps all of a sudden because it's all in the open, right? And then what we found is the biggest tool to that is in those moments as individuals and as groups, we have to celebrate the successes. We got to celebrate the wins. Some of those are really big wins and some are really small. And if you take the opportunity to celebrate the really small successes, then all of a sudden personal growth happens, team milestones start to happen. And what the biggest benefit when you have radical transparency followed with celebrating successes or wins, the people actually weed themselves out. The people that got a little cancer, the people that like to sit around the water cooler and complain or talk ill of their bosses or their coworkers, those that are stamp collecting in your analogy, they self-regulate and they self-leave. We went through this in one of our organizations. Well, we've gone through this so many times, but in the last couple of years, we went through it. And I don't know, we implemented a few of these transparency things and these visions and laying it out. I don't know, I think like 20 people within a 4-month period just self-exited, right? It became uncomfortable for them. And if you're just sitting back and you're just waiting for everything else to happen and you're just kind of collecting the paycheck and all of a sudden there's some accountability, there's some team focus, there's some celebrating of successes, but there's nothing to celebrate for you. Human nature is you go, this is uncomfortable for me. I think I should go somewhere else where I can coast. But if you're a business owner, you don't want anyone coasting. Coasting is pure death to your organization. And yeah, so accountability and those things. And then Zach, we also have a philosophy there that inside of a team culture, I think it's powerful to invest in their growth, right? Like share with the listeners what it looks like to actually invest in your teammates' growth, and what are some ways that you can invest in them. And I don't mean just with money, right? But how can you invest in your team's growth and helping them with either training tools or personal development or AI training? But what does that look like, right? To invest in their growth.
Well, sometimes it's what's that last part?
And how have we implemented that in the past?
Oh, yeah. So sometimes this can actually be a really scary thing. But if you remember, lots of times we've said that your businesses can never be bigger than you are. Well, that's true of your employee base as well, right? Your businesses are only as good as your weakest employees. So if you really want your business to be strong, you have to have strong employees and you have to invest in them. Well, part of the challenge is investing in them is when you build their skill set, sometimes they get too big for your company, right? And now all of a sudden they have an opportunity to go someplace else and you created that opportunity for them. I always think that's a positive thing because it always seems to come back in the end. Yes, you lose a great employee, you've put time, money, and effort into them, and they go find some other job or some better thing to take care of their family. I think that's a win because what you're really doing is you're developing people, and that's going to come back someday. So there's lots of times where we'll have an employee that I'll give you an example. So one of our employees was doing a lot of bookkeeping. Well, we offered to pay for their CPA certifications, right? Go get some more education. Why would we do that? It's good for them. They have an interest in it, but we also have a tax problem at the company. So it would behoove us to say, you know what, you're really good at bookkeeping and all these things, but if you also go become a CPA, you're going to learn the tax laws a whole lot better, and you're going to understand how to help the company save money, and you're going to be more valuable to the company, right? Now that person could leave and go start their own CPA firm. That might be what happens, but you've increased their abilities, which also now has increased the abilities of your company. One really low-hanging fruit thing that you can do, and this is kind of interesting too, is oftentimes we'll do like a mandatory book club. So we'll get a book, and it might be something that we look at the team, we're like, hey, the team's kind of struggling with this, so here's the book that talks about it. And then it's not us or the managers picking on anybody or pointing anybody out. It's like this self-regulation happens. Everybody reads the same chapter. You come together. It might be a 10, 15, 20 minute a week where everybody gets around the table and it's, okay, what was the chapter this week? What was your favorite parts? What really stuck out to you? How does this affect your job or whatever? And we've seen lots of times where people read these books and all of a sudden their accountability and their performance goes through the roof. They start believing in themselves more. They believe they're more valuable to the company. They start performing better. You also see places where they get together and go, hey, we're a high performing team and we got teammates that don't want to perform in a high performing way. So how do we fix that? And they start self-regulating each other, right? So those are just a few, certifications, sending people to school. The books are an easy one, but an unbelievable one. But those are some of the ways that we try to invest in some of our employees and help them become better. Because again, if they become better, then the company becomes better, right? Rising tide rises all boats.
Yeah, I go back to over the course of you and I have been business partners now almost 20 something years, and we've done this countless times, right? We just went through it in one of our companies. I don't know, you and I probably, I guess, own probably 8 companies together that all have employees. One of those, right? We just finished the book Think and Grow Rich, and it was a tremendous exercise with lots of employees, and it was awesome. From everyone in the shipping department to executives, right? It was fabulous. We recently did it with a book, How to Think Like a Millionaire. What was it?
Extreme ownership, was that the one?
Yes.
Jocko Willink?
We just did it with that book, and then I was just thinking about we did it a few years ago with the book The Secrets of the Millionaire Mind, because we had this problem. We had this problem with
Harvecker.
Yeah, but we had this problem where people were just not thinking big enough. And so we picked a book that had nothing to do with manufacturing like we were doing, had nothing to, but talked about how individuals all have a financial thermostat, and they set it just like they do at their house at 70 degrees, and they couldn't break through it. But once you identified that you were in control of it, and I just remember so many people after that process inside the company resetting it and being like, hey, yeah, he's right. I've never had more than $3,000 in my bank account, in my reserve bank account. I got to redo that and, come back to it and say, I now have 10, right? Like, so we do this with processes. We did it with the book, Good to Great, in one of our organizations recently. So we do this, right? And so these are things that we found to be extremely positive. And by the way, why'd you bring up, we've paid for several people to get their CPA degrees. We've never kept any.
No, we haven't. We get them as interns. We pour into them, pay to get their CPAs, and they take off.
No, but we love them all. We absolutely love them all, and it's so awesome that they actually, they bless the businesses, and then they went on to bigger and better and greater things, right, for them and their families. But we have an opportunity as listeners of this podcast to do that for people around the world, right? To be a positive beacon of light to help them. And you get the opportunity to do that in your opportunities every day, Zach, and our listeners get to if they take advantage of it. Well, Zach, as we come to a close today, these are two topics that we're pretty passionate about, right? Building team culture, helping to grow that space. I'm going to give you the last word there, and then I'll finish with a couple last thoughts about this week in gold and silver.
Perfect. I think it's the word that comes to my mind for this whole thing is dollar cost averaging, right? You just gotta make a little bit of investment a little bit at a time, whether that's into your business, your employees, into your relationships, whether that's your strategy for gold and silver investing or whatever it is. But it's the consistency. A little bit over time will win, right? So if it's with building your company or employees or whatever, just dollar cost average, you'll win.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because in a world that's uncertain, right? There's never been a more uncertain business climate than right now, whether it's the AI revolution, whether it's the change of dynamics inside of business right now with the advent of AI, new technologies, reduction in labor force, and then you add to it just the lack of consumer spending. You and I keep track of consumer spending because we have some of our businesses that are really consumer oriented. Like, those businesses meet the consumer right at the point of they don't have to go play in our trampoline parks, for example, but they want to. And so it's it's the dollar that's the hardest to get sometimes when the economy tightens. But because we have our finger on that pulse, we know when households in America are hurting. We know it, right? We see it on a frontline basis with the dollars that come into our consumer businesses. We're in that today. We are in this spot where the consumer is constricted like a boa constrictor. The average household it's like a snake wrapped around a little rabbit, man. It's struggling. It's over. And they don't have the extra dollars to spend. And I'm just here to tell you, it's in these moments when the economy is choked really tight. I mean, you probably just fueled up your truck, you diesel at $6 and regular unleaded at $5.50, and you can afford it, Zach. But guess what? The vast majority of people can't. That's the constriction that's happening. What I've seen throughout my life in business, Zach, is when that happens, that is the exact moment that you should take and squirrel or change some habits in your life and buy real assets. That is the time when the economy chokes like a boa constrictor around the common man's dollar. We're about to see some pop in inflation. We're about to see potentially a little downward spiral in the U.S. economy. we've just seen this movie before. And so I would just say, right, if you have any way to drink 2 less Monsters a day and buy some silver, good time to do it. If you have a chance to not go to Maverick for lunch and a pack of lunch, like, it's the time, right? Like, I plead with our listeners because we've seen it so many times throughout the last 30 years in particular. I recently looked at a chart, Zach, and it showed the last 30 years. Do you know there's never been a 5-year period that silver didn't increase by 100% and gold didn't increase by 100% in a 5-year span for the last 30 years? So in these economies, when we're getting choked, now's the time to take advantage. And so I'll just tell the listeners, right, just like you just did, find a way to consistently do something that's better for you, whether it's in your business, for your finances at home, or for your health, even in that matter, right? A little consistency every day will be the thing that makes the biggest difference. And so at the end of the day, Zach, we love our listeners. We want what's very best for them. We want them to win in their businesses. We want them to win in their personal life and their relationships. And we want them to win in these times when the rest of the world gets constricted. We want you to win. And so, man, can't wait to see these listeners win, Zach. So last party thought, Zach.
Nope. I think that's great counsel. The sun will rise after the sun sets, right? Like, if you just put away a little bit now and you prepare yourself, the economy is going to be ugly. But guess what? It will recover. And if you've done these things like what Josh just said, there will be lots of opportunity. And in all these times, there is lots of opportunity. So look for it. It's there.
It's there every day. So take the opportunity that we can't wait to see you next week on the Sound Money, Sound Principles podcast. Do us a favor, like and subscribe to the show. Share it with a friend. We look forward to next week's episode as we dive deep into some more sound money and sound principles. So, Zach, have a great week. We'll see you all next week.
All right. Sounds good. See you guys.